Hello and welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast. My name is Rohan Karamandi, and as usual, I have Phil. Hey, Phil.
Hey, Rohan, how you going?
Good. And today we're joined by none other than Dave Slusher. How are you, Dave?
I am fantastic.
This podcast is sponsored by Home Assistant Cloud by Nabu. For a small monthly fee, you'll unlock powerful features like secure, effortless access to your system from anywhere, your choice of voice assistants, offsite backups, and more, all configurable in the UI with no YAML needed. It also supports the development of Home Assistant, ESPHome, and other Open Home Foundation projects. Click the link in the description to learn more. We'd also like to give a shout out to our Patreon members, including our executive producers, Benny and Rob. You can help support the show and get early access to episodes, all in an ad-free feed. To support the show, check out homeassistant.fm and click Patreon in the menu.
It's cool having a fellow podcaster in the mix, and it's cool to see somebody that's doing the same thing. We have creators and stuff. It's usually YouTube and that kind of stuff. It's not too often that we have someone that does like pure proper podcast, right? So this is going to be interesting. Why don't you start off by telling folks what you do, and then we can get to why you're here today.
Sure. I have my primary podcast is the Evil Genius Chronicles, which has the distinction of being the longest running podcast. Mainly because I'm too dumb and too stubborn to stop doing it. So, like most of these things, you look at like your founders of Silicon Valley. A lot of that had to do with being in the right place at the right time, at the right age, and all the sort of stuff. And I just happened to be hanging around reading Adam Curry's blog when the early podcasting experiments were happening. And because in the 90s I did a radio show that I, for a time, produced out of my house. I had microphones, I had a mixer, I had the stuff. And I had just moved house. And the box with the audio stuff was on top of a stack. And so Adam Curry did the daily source code. And I said, well, there's my stuff right there. I could just hook this up and go. And so I did.
Yeah.
And so 21 years later, I'm still doing it. So
wow.
I no longer have a day job. I no longer have all this other stuff, but I'm still podcasting. So
I immediately feel unprofessional. So we apologize.
If you saw the mess that got me into the Podcast Hall of Fame, you would not feel in any way. It was like this guy achieved that. It's like it should be a story of hope.
Right. Wow,
that's funny. That's hey, I mean, but it's so funny, right? Even like a lot of like, obviously, we're doing a lot more YouTube stuff now, and so on, and. It's all the same thing, right? And it's like you start off with like just the most kind of basic whatever, and then you kind of move up from there, right? And it's most YouTube channels and podcasts are pretty Mickey Mouse until you finally like hit some stride, right?
I will tell you, there was a time period where the kind of the one person monologist type YouTuber got really popular, and I thought, oh my God, those guys are doing the same thing we've been doing for 15, 20 years. They just turned their camera on and now they're making millions of dollars. It's like, oh my God, we could have done this the whole time.
That's so funny. You know what? Minus the millions of dollars. That's kind of what we did, right? We're just like, just record the video and then put it on. Yeah. It's another outlet, right? It's all it is. But
yeah.
Well, again, thanks, Dave, for being here. So, let's talk about you and why you're on the podcast today. What brought you here?
Well, I've been a Home Assistant user. I actually had to fact check my. I created the calendar and then I looked and I said that can't possibly be right, because I recall it being in COVID era, but it was actually fall of 2020, which I believe was right before they went from the numbered releases to the like time-stamped releases.
Right.
Yeah.
I think maybe the first release I started was like within the last 3 or 4 of the like 0113 or whatever that was before it went to 2021. And so I had a friend at the time. I was a developer advocate for ServiceNow, and we did a show called the Live Coding Happy Hour, where every Friday, like late in the afternoon on Friday, we would get a beer, we would turn on Google Meet, we would stream live to YouTube, and we would just pick a problem and try to do it. So we're like always hungry for integrating things to other things. And so I had my former partner showed me his home assistant setup, which when I think back to like what blew my mind then was like so rudimentary compared to, what I'm doing now. But he had the one panel and he's turning his lights on and off and he's doing the things. And then because our platform both could integrate out and could receive webhooks, at some point we did a episode where we were doing things in ServiceNow and like turning lights on in our house. Like we would when a ticket was closed, it would like flash a light red or so, something like that. Where we were because we used to love to do. I mean, anything. We had like a vast library of a ticket going from a state to another state or a record being updated or whatever. And so when you could do an actual thing in the physical world, that was like gold. It's visual. It's got, it's so much fun. So we thought, so there were two, when he showed me his demonstration, my first thought was, this is super cool. I want to do this. And my second thought was, we can absolutely mine this for content for our day job. And we did both. So
That's wicked. So you guys actually tied ServiceNow into Home Assistant and then just
yeah.
started.
And this was
That's
long. It was at least 5. It was 5-ish years ago. I'd have to go back and look at the video to see what we did. Probably we were consuming I don't even remember which direction we went. We must have been hitting an API on Home Assistant to do something.
Sure, like an API, like a webhook, like just like a webhook trigger.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, we had the capacity to do all of these things, and I don't even remember exactly how we hooked it up, but we were doing it, and it was fun stuff.
That's cool. So how did you get from there to kind of actually automating your house outside of for like, I don't know, just for fun on your pod or on stream?
Yeah, after my friend demoed it to me, I had a spare Raspberry Pi 3 lying around, and so I said, "Okay, let's." And was this late 2020? Would this have been before the HACS OS? I can't remember my initial install. It's certainly been through a couple revisions through SD card crashes, which are both like an SD card crash when you don't have a backup is both the best and worst thing that happens to you. Because you look at it and you think, oh, I had a running install, I had all this stuff, but then you get the new card and you can start over and you can do things better for all the ways you architected it incorrectly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got a clean slate, right? You've got no choice but to do it properly.
It's like all those things I did wrong, I'm going to do right this time.
Yeah, but it's true, right? I mean, it is, but it is very like, I mean, at the end of the day, if today, I mean, obviously I do backups and everything, so it's less of a problem. But if that happened to me today, and that has happened to, I mean, the best of us, right? It happens to all of us, and especially way back when Home Assistant wasn't really optimized for SD cards, with the read writes and whatever. But it's like you just want to take the Raspberry Pi and throw it at a wall, right? Luckily,
Yeah.
I've never done that because all of my Pis are still intact. But it is infuriating. Right?
Yeah. And I still, like to this day, I still have it on. I think I upgraded to a Pi 4 and it's been on that basically ever since.
You're still running it on the Pi 4?
Yeah. And I have a Synology NAS and I could put it in a Docker container, but honestly, I don't feel like doing all the things that I would have to do to get, I have the Zigbee coordinator plugged into my Pi, and I just bought the ZWA2 and plugged it in there. And so the physical things that I have plugged into my Pi, I just don't want to deal with plugging into anything else and setting that up. And it's still running like a champ on that Pi, and I will continue doing that until I can't.
So what's cool is the ZWA2 now can be portable, right? So I think this. I mean, at the time of recording, this was launched like a week ago.
Very experimental, not out of the box.
It is absolutely experimental. The ZWA2s that Phil and I have a little more involved, but the production versions of it are pretty straightforward. I actually did it to mine and works great.
Yeah, I saw that announcement and it blew my mind because I didn't even know there was the capacity for such a thing. It's like, oh, these guys were really thinking ahead when they built this device. If they put this in there.
It's we were chatting with we're Phil and I are on these creator calls, right? So it's like us and then Paulus, Frank, and then a bunch of other creators and stuff like that. And so Paulus is telling us like we get a little advance notice typically for these kind of things, and we're part of beta tests and stuff. Anyway, so Paul's like, "Hey, I have this thing coming out," and I was like, honestly, it was actually very frustrating to me why you didn't do this before because I'm like, it has an ESP chip, you could totally do this, right? And Paulus is like, "We know, it's coming, it's here." Like, it's like you'll get the firmware and whatever, and I've been playing with it, and it's been pretty good. So I do encourage that, and just again because a lot of times people have it in their basements or locked up somewhere, something like that, right? And this way you can at least take your uh, ZWA and put it wherever, right? Like so.
Well, certainly when I first started doing Zigbee, I have my office up here and it's in one corner of the house upstairs. And so it's not well suited to have a coordinator, but that's where all the stuff is. So even though I can't remember the very first Zigbee things I did I think were a couple bulbs and a couple switches, but I had this trail of extra Zigbee devices that were doing nothing, that were just the path so that I would have the grid
Yeah.
to get to the other side of the house. So I had them plugged. I have one plugged into the attic that is still there. It doesn't do anything. It's just a nice repeater, basically. So I certainly have done. That's when the tail is wagging the dog, when you're putting extra devices places you don't particularly want them solely to get the mesh.
Well, you know what? I had these. Obviously, I pulled them out a little more now, but I had these. They're literally the IKEA repeaters, right? So this entire part of it, its sole purpose is just to repeat the signal, right? And it's like I'm taking an outlet, whatever. Luckily, I just stuck it in my closet, right? So it's fine. It's not a huge deal. But at the time, it's because in my basement and upstairs and stuff, there was a bit of spottiness, right? Because I didn't have as many Zigbee devices as I do today. Now it's pretty solid. I don't need these anymore. Hence it's on my desk. But yeah, it's totally get that, right? Like where you kind of say, okay, I need coverage in all of these areas. Let me just go plug in, a device or whatever, right? And
Back in the day, like some brands of Zigbee devices wouldn't mesh with other brands of Zigbee devices as well. Like you could get the IKEA stuff that wouldn't talk to Hue or Xiaomi or whoever, and you'd be like, okay, well, what? Like you have to buy a whole bunch of different devices just to get the mesh to work.
Well, let me tell you the story of my mailbox. So when I first started with Zigbee, partly it was to get some of the motion sensors, um, and partly because I was tired of the usage pattern of Wi-Fi devices. I don't like. I wanted local control. If Wi-Fi is down, I still want my lights to come on. That sort of thing. And there was a time period where my outgoing network was a little less reliable. And I thought, "Ugh, it is such a drag when your lights don't turn on because you had a 2-minute outage at sunset."
Yep.
It's
totally,
really awful.
totally.
So I started Zigbeeifying, and one of the like white whales of this whole effort was, as I look out the window, I can see my mailbox, and it's maybe like 100 meters from where I'm sitting right now. And what I wanted was to put a motion sensor in there so that I knew when the mailbox opened. I just want to know when the mail arrives because it's just
Mhm.
far enough that it's a drag to walk out there and the mail hasn't come. And so I said, okay, great. I will put a Zigbee motion sensor out there. And it worked. It didn't not work. If it just didn't work or couldn't connect from there, that would be one thing. But it just barely worked and just barely didn't work. So it would work for a day, 2 days, and then it would lose connection. And connection would be lost for a week, and then it would find it for a day, and then. So one of the things that I did is right outside my garage, I'm right above the garage. And outside the garage were these kind of like candelabra type sconces. They take the small bulbs, like not the A19 big
Oh, the
bulb
little
bases,
tiny.
but the little candelabra bulbs. So now,
Yeah.
so now what I'm looking for are Zigbee bulbs with the little base. I was like, okay. So I found some Sengled Zigbee bulbs. And so I got two goals, which is if I'm going to Zigbeefy that, I can turn them on and off and I can do all the fun things. But I want them to be repeaters so that I have a little bit more reach out there to my mailbox. I'm just trying to give my mailbox a chance to work. So I bought those Sengleds and I put them in there. And then I found that Sengleds are the one bulb that doesn't repeat. I'm like, what? What?
Yeah.
That's the whole point of putting them in there. So then I bought like 2 Philips bulbs and dropped them in the sconces. So they're almost all Sengleds except for 2 of them. And it worked. And it went from, dropping, 7 days and then being on to 2 to dropping 4 days and being on for 3. It still didn't work. And so meanwhile, I liked having those Zigbee bulbs there because I've just stuck a little motion sensor. And so I have very complicated logic on that driveway, which is like the whole Home Assistant journey is thinking things like, I back my car into this driveway and when it's dark, I can't really see where I am. So I want that light on when I'm backing up. How do I achieve that? And so I put the motion sensor up there, but I also have an automation that says it's a geofence automation that says if I arrive home and the sun is down, turn that light on whenever it is. Or, if in time boundaries, if there's motion, turn it on. So I have the most complicated condition of any of my automations is turning this driveway light on.
Sure.
But all that stuff works, but I still can't get the mailbox notifications with the robustness that I want. So then when you had the CTO of Zeus on, I thought, all right, here we go. Long wave, Z-Wave. That's long range Z-Wave. That's what I want. So I bought the Zeus coordinator and a Zeus motion sensor. And I did it and it worked almost like so close, but it didn't quite work. I thought, oh. So that, and I thought, am I just going to have to give up on this? This seems so doable. It does not seem like the mission to fail on. It was like, I can see the mailbox. It's right there. I just want notifications. And that's when I got the ZWA2. And so I saw that announced. I said, this is my last swing at this pinata. I'm going to buy this ZWA2, hook it up. And since I hooked that up, it's been perfect. So I guess that extra care with the antenna, like the bigger antenna on the paper towel holder looking thing, gives it just enough range that it will connect to my mailbox and correctly give me those notifications. But it was like a year from beginning to end, like when I first wanted this to happen to when I was actually getting the notifications.
That's interesting. I was going to say the other technology, not to add more technologies in your stack to try, would be LoRa, right? It's like, which is again, it's more industrial stuff, right? Typically, and it's got its range and its bandwidth is like, I don't know, like a kilobit or something like that. Like it's not much, but it's enough, right? And it's not like you're sending video over it or anything like that. So that I would have been like, if you fully gave up on it, I would have suggested to go that way. But
in a huff, I would have said, I'm not doing anything else. And then in a year, I would have bought a bunch of LoRa stuff.
Yeah. But Z-Wave LR is a really cool technology, right? And you do lose the meshing part of Z-Wave when you do it, but it's still pretty awesome. So is that all that's on your Z-Wave network?
No, actually, it was all that was on there, and then I bought a power. I needed a power monitoring switch for my electric lawnmower, and it is far too long a story. Most of this year on my podcast has been talking about my lawnmower and replacing the batteries in my Ryobi lawnmower from the lead acid to the lithium phosphate, and it took all summer, and I fried my blade controller. It was just an awful thing. But when it got back, I was so nervous. What I wanted to know is how much power am I putting back into these batteries? And I've got a smart charger, but the second the charge is over, it wipes the history. It like just turns off, and it has no way of seeing that. So I said, I'm going to plug this into a power monitoring thing, use Home Assistant to tell me how much energy has gone into this battery. And I said, if I'm going to do that, I might as well do a Z-Wave plug, because why not?
Sure.
I mean, I have it. So I have actually the long range Z-Wave going to my mailbox, and then the mesh going to that. So that is the one
Nice.
device I have, is that power monitoring switch. But then, and this gets us to another topic, is our power company has this weird pricing model where for many years they had this beat the peak, where they asked you nicely not to use energy, which turns out not to be that effective. So what they did is they changed the pricing structure. So there's 3 peak hours. In the summer, it's 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. And like the rest of those 21 hours, it's 7 cents a kilowatt hour, which is fairly cheap. For those 3 hours, they will take the biggest 1 hour you had in the month, and they will charge you $12 per kilowatt hour for that 1 hour. So if you are like, if for example I'm charging my car and I added 7 kilowatt hours that I wouldn't have normally, or 8 kilowatt hours, that's $100 that one time. That one charge cost me $100. It would have cost me 56 cents otherwise. So I thought, I have this switch. Why don't I just turn it off? I don't need to charge my lawnmower during peak hours. Why don't I just turn that switch off? And so I added a calendar of the peak hours. And so based on that calendar, I have an automation that turns that switch on and off, just so that I don't forget and charge the lawnmower during peak hours. My car, I already, on the charger, I already have that schedule. So like these are, this is kind of when I'm finding this is more of like the peak Home Assistant usage, is when you first start, is can I make anything happen? Can I do anything? And then later on, it's like it gets more and more optimized. And now you're thinking, how can I improve what I'm doing? How can I reduce my electric bill? How can I do these other things?
Yeah.
No, and then this is the gateway, right? Like next minute you're going to be getting a washing machine only to its cycles during these certain times, or you're going to be like, all right, let's turn the Synology NAS off for that hour or two, and it's going to potentially cost me all that time for the rest of the month, right? And just trying to like load shed as much as you can.
It definitely changes my buying pattern, because before I buy things, I look to see. There was a time period where I had that Chamberlain adapter for my garage door, where I mean, I still have it. I could use the app, and it worked with Home Assistant up until it didn't work with it. But going forward, I'm not buying any more Chamberlain stuff because it doesn't work with Home Assistant. And so, if I buy any IoT device, the very first thing I look at is this going to work with Home Assistant? It's partly why I'm now only buying Zigbee and ZWA stuff, because then I don't have to think about it. I mean, it automatically is going to work with it. But if I buy any Wi-Fi based anything, I'm checking for Home Assistant compatibility before I purchase it. If I buy a camera, it's got to have an RTSP stream that's easily available, or I don't want it. And so the same thing. I haven't quite got to the point of like buying large appliances in this era, but certainly like if it was the same price between 2 washing machines and one had exactly that, had Wi-Fi functionality and that sort of thing, I'm going to buy the one that, I'm going to buy the one that has that functionality.
Yeah. And like, it's getting so much better now. Like big brands we're starting to see now are taking notice of this, right? Like we have, when we're at CES this year, we saw Bosch coming out with a whole bunch of Matter-enabled devices. Like I think they had a Matter-enabled microwave and a fridge or something. And even now we're seeing LG creating their own integrations into Home Assistant. Like they're now someone in the community created the first integration, and now LG are starting to come in and bring an official integration into Home Assistant, and they're maintaining that, adding new features to it. So it's it's the tide is starting to turn, I'm feeling.
And even Samsung too, right? Like where traditionally Samsung was like, no, 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 we have smart things. We're only going to do smart things integrations, and they kind of locked not locked everybody else out. It's still kind of open, but it required effort, right? Like, but now they're actively, starting to keep things open, right? And as it should be.
And that's one of the strengths of, like Nabakasu as a company, is that you can have the greatest like open source project in the world. But if it's an open source project, that's not the language that companies speak. But when you've got a corporate entity talking to another corporate entity, they know how to talk to them. And so, that to me, that makes it much, I'm sure it makes it much easier when you say, well, we've got X number of users paying, $5 a month, $6 a month to, so we are a functioning company, and we will provide these capabilities and you'll get this value back. And, so it's a very different discussion from, hey, we're a utopic bunch of techno hippies that have this weird thing that runs on Raspberry Pis.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
That's funny.
yeah, trust us.
So, I mean, you were talking about Chamberlain and not using Chamberlain and
Right.
so on. So, did you end up picking a solution there to automate it, or did you pretty much like me give up?
So there was a point where we had bought a house for my father-in-law, and it had like the house was built with one of those smart Chamberlains. So there was a point in time where I had both my house and his house like in-home assistant, and I could tell when he was opening his garage. I could see when he took his trash out, which is very helpful when you're kind of overseeing an elderly person. It's like, okay, now I know a little bit what's happening over in that house. And then that one day, it's all stopped working. And kind of in disgust, I went to look for other options, and that's what led me to the RATGDO board. So I ended up, I bought, I approached them kind of cautiously, because I bought one of them and I plugged it up just because I didn't want to drop, $150 on something that turns out not
Yeah.
to work. So I said, I'm going to buy a single one and see how it works. And, I did the whole provisioning of the thing where you plug it into your computer and flash the firmware, and then it hooks up to the ESPHome add-on. And I will be honest, I provisioned two of these things. I still don't understand how it works. Like, I watched it working and I didn't understand why it worked.
Yeah.
But it did work. And then I plug it into my garage door, and I'm trying to think of almost everything on there works. The one thing that it doesn't work, so I can open and close the door. I can actually turn the lights on and off. And I created an automation where I put stuck a motion sensor, and I turn the garage door lights on if there's any motion. So I actually am using RATGDO to just turn the lights on sometimes. The one thing it does is, although it exposes the motion sensor on the garage door as a entity in Home Assistant, it never actually works. Like, that's never changed in 2 years. So it's there. I don't know if I always hold out hope that at some point it will actually just start working, because you never know. I don't know if that's a physical thing. I don't know if it's the wiring. I don't know anything about it. I also didn't understand. Not only do I not understand how the ESPHome part of RATGDO worked, I also don't understand how RATGDO itself works, because I believe I only hooked 2 wires in there. I'm like, how am I getting all this stuff happening through 2 wires? Like, I don't,
Yeah.
like, either there's some sort of complicated pulse that means something different, or it felt like I had to plug more stuff in to get the amount of functionality I got out of it. But
Well, yeah. So normally the brilliance of it is normally it's like with Chamberlain, whatever. It's everything's encrypted and whatever, right? So whereas with any generic garage door opener, you can just use a relay and just say, yeah, this wire, close contact, and the garage door opens, right? It's like you pushed a button. But Chamberlain obviously has gone off, and for quote unquote security reasons, they've made it a little more complicated. But yeah, I agree. The logic behind RATGDO and some of these other ones are pretty. It's taken effort, and it's pretty cool that somebody actually figured that out, right? So it's
I'll tell you another one of those things that I held hope out for is, somewhere in the middle of my Home Assistant journey, I bought an Audi e-tron electric car, and there is an integration in HACS, and it works. And so from day one, you put your VIN in there and it does certain stuff. And so the read functionalities always worked flawlessly. So it always knows the mileage, it knows the state of charge, it knows all this stuff. The actions didn't necessarily work. So you could, for example, there's a action to start your climate control, and it just didn't work. And if you went into the issues, you would see for a time period, that action had hard coded like Europe in the string of what it sends. So if you're not in Europe, it's never going to work because it's telling it you're in Europe when it's trying to do it. And optimistically, at one point, like as I sort of upped my game, I had more and more of these automations that are based on a conditional. And one of them is I have a smart plug on a fountain that we have. And so if the temperature is lower than 40 degrees, don't turn that fountain on, because if the fountain's frozen, I don't want to burn out the pump. So, things like that. And so I set up an automation that says, if it's a school morning and it's colder than 55 degrees, start the climate control in the car. Because this is a thing I would do. I would hit that button, except when I didn't remember to hit that button. And then we go to school and we get in a cold car and it's like, Dad, you didn't turn the...
Yeah.
It's funny how quickly you get spoiled to these things.
The horror.
The heats weren't seated when I walked into the car. And so I set up this automation that said, if it's under 55 on a school day, start the climate control. And it just did nothing for months, until the day where it did something. Like one day there was a Audi update to that integration, and the next morning it worked. So that's actually one of those. I maybe enjoy it better that way than if it worked at the beginning. Like the magic functioning later on. It's like,
You appreciate it so much more, right?
It wasn't you that did it. It just magically happened. Like you had set all the conditions they were up, and then someone else just flipped the switch for you.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Unfortunately, I'm terrible at Python and I don't particularly like it. So I've looked at some of the code, and it's like the one language I've programmed in so many languages, and Python's like the one that I bounced off of. So every time I've ever had the inclination to help out or submit a pull request, I'm like, oh, I just can't deal with this Python, man. I know everyone else in the world loves it. I can't get into it.
But again, it's preference, right? Like some people like certain things, some people don't, right? And it is what it is. You talked about in your notes to us. You talked about terminal as well. So getting information on the screen and doing those kind of things. What are you doing with it? And I'm intrigued that you're using terminal specifically, because again, it's one of those things where something new pops up, and then all of a sudden everybody's like, "Hey, have you seen this thing? Have you heard this thing? Blah 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 blah." So, what's your experience with?
I'm gonna say probably 3 weeks ago I had never heard of it. And then I just happened to run across it. And this is one of those, so I'm retired, so I don't have a day job anymore. So I'm a little bit susceptible to like, oh, there's a thing to do. Oh, let me do that thing. And so I happened to just run across it, and I can't even remember how I ran across it. And so this, in a couple of weeks, this whole process has played out where I looked at it, and I looked at buying a retail terminal, which is $130. And then there was the DIY kit. I believe I ran across a how-to of a guy who sourced his own parts, built it, and he said it was roughly cost parity when he built it. And this guy, I believe, was in maybe Amsterdam or somewhere in Europe. And if you looked at all his Amazon links, they were twice as much in the US relatively to what they were. So it was not even cost. It was like more to build your own. But then I found that Seed Studio was selling this kit.
Yeah.
That had the e-ink panel and a battery and the controller and the e-ink driver. And it was like $45. And I thought, okay, let's do that. And then I said, and you have the option of bringing your own server. So if you hook your own device to terminal, it costs $50. A one-time lifetime license for that device, which is where that cost parity. Because when it, right away, when you take that $50 out, now it's got to be $80 or cheaper to even break even on your DIY terminal, right?
For sure.
So I said, great, I'll just set up a Docker container with my own server. And in fact, the reference implementation is in Ruby on Rails. I'm like, great, that's my favorite language. And then I get the thing, and then I realize that all the plugins and everything that makes terminal useful does not exist in the Ruby bring your own server option. The only thing it will do is proxy to your official terminal account, which in order to do that, you have to pay the $50 license. I'm like, oh no, this is the worst case scenario. Or I've got this janky pile of parts, and I'm still going to end up paying $130 no matter how I slice it. And then there's a PHP version of the server that actually is more functional, which is what I'm using. So you can't use all the Ruby-based plugins because they obviously won't run, but there is a community of people building these PHP plugins. So I started fooling around with that, and one of the I just happened across one random recipe where they were getting information out of Home Assistant. There is a Home Assistant terminal plugin that will push, will basically take Home Assistant screenshots and push it. I have tried and failed to get that thing operating. I have never actually had any success with that. But when you go the other direction, you can create just your own little recipe, which is anything where you can give it an URL and some headers. So you can create an authorization token and put it in there. You can hit an URL and then get that information out. And if you hit the API states in Home Assistant, you get literally all the states of every sensor. And so what I have done is I've got a series of recipes. I've got one for my car that hits API states and then just looks for all the entities. What's my state of charge? Am I charging? Am I not charging? And then I give myself a progress bar if it is charging, and I show where it is, and so a nice graphic, and it will tell me how long it has to charge, what's the mileage till the next inspection, all that kind of stuff. And so what I sort of have done is just now I'm proxying information, but I'm using Home Assistant as the proxy. Like any information I can get out of Home Assistant, I can get onto that terminal with a little bit of one URL and then some templating code. And so I should say I found out all of this before I found out kind of the awfulness of the founder, who apparently, if you go to his Twitter account, it is entirely deleted because apparently he said lots of horrible things on there, and is now walking everything back. So I am in no way endorsing this cat.
That's interesting. I had no clue.
I didn't either, and I was searching on the terminal hashtag on Mastodon, and I found this group of people talking about this guy. I'm like, oh no, this is why we can't have nice things.
That's right.
It's like every project, it's like, all right, great, Basecamp and whatever. These guys are saying these awful things. It's like, guys, just zip it, think it, and don't say it.
Just DIY, right? That's you don't end up endorsing anybody's anything.
So this is actually what made me happy that I didn't buy the retail version, that I bought the DIY one from Seed Studio. I'm like, I don't think I gave this guy any money. So at the very least, I can take a little bit of comfort in that fact. So, but now I'm using that just for it's an alternate way of seeing information from Home Assistant in kind of a passive way. I'm refreshing faster than usual because it kind of burns your e-ink battery. Every refresh burns it as opposed to an LED screen where it's always on. So I'm changing every 2 minutes because 5 or 15 just was too long to sit on one screen. It's like, I'll plug it in more often. I'd rather it be more useful. But that's one of those things, is I'm kind of thinking, what other information is there in Home Assistant that I want to see? Like the package tracking information, out of 17 track. I probably couldn't have integrated directly to 17 track, but that information flows to Home Assistant and I can easily get it out of Home Assistant. So that's the sort of thing. It's like, personal capital. I have had that. That's one of the very first things I integrated to my Home Assistant. So, just got, account balances and things like that. Those sit in Home Assistant. I can easily get all that stuff out of there by hitting API states. And so that's kind of what I'm doing is just as something occurs to me, like, I'd like to see that on the screen. So I just go and create a new recipe and do a little templating and add another thing to that terminal. And so it's actually been really fun.
So just on that personal finance one, so are you doing any automations based around, like balances,
No,
or
it's like if
is
it
it
gets
just
to this
purely
thing,
just to get on a
sell,
dashboard?
or if it gets to this thing,
Yeah,
cancel all my Amazon orders.
yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, even get a deposit in the bank account, flash the lights green, or
No,
Yeah.
when they left, you flash them red.
honestly, I don't think. I think really the only thing I have access to is the totals. I don't think I have that granular. I have to really go in there. I've had that. I've had kind of the various. As because when I started with this was I was kind of approaching retirement, and so that was all from day one. These were kind of coincident things. I'm like, well, I'm getting close to retiring, and I've got this home assistant. Let me monitor my progress here. It's like, all right, how am I doing on this? And so I don't believe I have any actions on that. I think the only thing I can do is kind of look at values as they go up and down. But it's possible, but I don't believe so. I think it's a fairly dumb read only view that I have in there.
That's still pretty neat. Again, in a pinch, you can always be like, "Hey, where am I? Right?
Yeah.
Or where is the state of my finance?"
I mean, this is I played with and I didn't really get it to work is the Domino's integration. Not because I
Awesome.
care that much. I just wanted to see it work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But I don't know if you guys remember that like Domino's had an API in like 2002.
yeah.
And you
Domino's aren't a
could
pizza company; they're a technology company, right?
yeah,
Like they were always on the bleeding edge things.
Yeah.
they had like a Perl module that you could like execute these Perl commands and it would send you a pizza. And I'm like, the good news is you can do all this nerdy stuff, and the bad news is the best case is you get a Domino's pizza.
But that's still pretty awesome, right? Like
But
it's people you wouldn't expect, or things you wouldn't expect. Like why
yeah,
would Domino's invest in making an API? Like again, even if it's just for fun or whatever, there's still a resource, a person sitting there
right.
building this
They paid it.
API.
Yeah, they paid someone to do that. And this was also this was long before smartphones. So this was not,
Yeah.
a pathway to their mobile app. This was just they just did it. And so more power to them.
It's so good. I love it. Yeah, again, that's the way to do it, right? It's accidentally being like open source and developer friendly and whatever. And not that I don't, maybe that was their intention, but I it's probably just some guy sitting there. It's like, hey, this is cool. I should do this.
I want to do this. Is there is anybody going to tell me no? No. All right. Well, I'm going to put this up then.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
If you're looking to upgrade your smart home, you can't go past Zeus. Zeus have just released their brand new Z-Wave long-range siren and chime, the ZSE 5800LR, which you might remember Agnes teasing when she was here a few months ago. You can trigger audio and visual LED alarms based on smart sensors or other conditions, and the audio speaker plays your own files for personalized automation, or there's a selection in a preloaded library. Zeus are an official Works with Home Assistant partner, helping Nabucasa by providing long-range devices for testing the new Home Assistant Connect ZWA2 radio. Zeus offer a range of affordable and innovative devices, including water leak sensors, water valve controllers, smart plugs, and scene controllers. Their new Zen 78 high power relay allows you to control and monitor higher load appliances, up to 40 amps, which is perfect for pool pumps, air compressors, and other high power outlets. For the best prices on all Zeus products, head over to thesmartesthouse.com. That's thesmartesthouse.com. So you've actually gone the hardware and rebuilt your smart home a couple of times, moving a couple of times. Um, what, like, how do you do a fresh start each time? Like, do you go, okay, I'm going to go and organize my smart home in this way now? I'm going to do dashboards in a different way. Like, what's your sort of thinking when you want to go down when you're doing a fresh start?
Well, I'll tell you, like this is a thing that I have been thinking about a lot recently because it's probably been about 4 years since the last hard crash. For one thing, I'm much more like now I do the automated backups that go to my NAS. So, I'm not. I have had something happened. One of those. Do you remember maybe 6 or 8 months ago there was some there was a release that wouldn't start if you had a certain integration enabled. This was within the last year. And so I did an upgrade. That was the first time where I had an upgrade go wrong. So I did an upgrade and then Home Assistant wouldn't come back up. And I recall it was, it's very much Murphy's Law because we had a friend coming over to have dinner. And so when I told you about my driveway integration, I had done an update and now Home Assistant won't restart. And this is at the same time when like a school friend is coming over and they park in this driveway and like the lights don't come on because my Home Assistant is dead. It's like the only outage I've had in the past 4 years. And it's in the 6-hour period where we have people coming over, and so I had to restore from backups a couple times. And then it turns out I could have done something on the console, but so ever since then I've been a little more, for example, I don't blithely hit that update button. I only hit that update button when I know that if something goes wrong, I have an hour or two to fix it. Like I don't do it when I'm away from the house, for example. I used to just, if that thing came up on my phone, I would just hit the button. Now I don't do it. But if I had to start all over again, one of my focuses now is on quality. I told you how when you first started, it's make any light turn on. That's your goal. It's like, woo, look, a light turned on. Look, a light turned on at sunset. Fantastic. And now it's a lot more about maintainability. It's about quality. One of the things I've been doing so wrong the whole time is this real scattershot entity naming that I have. Like I need to come up with one naming scheme for devices and entities and use it consistently, because let's say like there's a smart bulb right in front of my face. What's that bulb called? I cannot tell you without looking what that name of that bulb is. Is it Dave Office bulb? Is it smart bulb Dave Office? I would have to go dig around. Yeah. So if I had a consistent nomenclature, whatever device, like protocol device room or something like that. It doesn't matter what it is as long as it was consistent. Like that's the sort of thing. If I started fresh, I would sit down and work out a scheme, and I would not name anything until I had a consistent scheme, so that I could predictably tell you what anything in my house was. Which leads to the story of renaming my smart plug. While we were traveling over the summer, there was a bad lightning storm at home, and we were in Las Vegas on vacation. And my house went unresponsive because it was just one of these things where the power had just flickered enough. And so I texted my neighbor, and we had internet to the neighborhood, but it was just my router needed to be restarted. And because of this, I was not 100% sure. I have Ecobee thermostats that were in vacation mode. And I didn't know whether they need the cloud or not to come out of vacation mode. So I couldn't even tell you, is the house going to be hot when we get home or not? It was a gamble. And as I was going through all this, I thought, I have a house full of Zigbee switches. Why don't I plug that router? It's just this little puck that the cable company gives me, this like a Wi-Fi router thing. Why don't I plug that into a Zigbee switch? And then when I don't have a network, power cycle that thing. And so I got home and I took a switch that was on. We had these fake trees that had Christmas lights, and then the Christmas lights burned out. And I just took that switch and renamed it to Wi-Fi router, and I put it there. And then first I tried to use speed test as the trigger, except it turns out that if the speed test is less than 5 megs a second, turns out that when you have no network, you don't get 0, you get not a number. You get nothing, which is not less than 5. It's nothing. So that didn't work as a trigger. So then I'm like, is this even possible? And then I found the ping integration. So I'm just going to ping one of those Google DNS servers. So I ping 88888. And if for 30 minutes it can't reach that, turn the switch off. 1 minute later, turn it back on. Great. And then I kind of, to test it out, I just turned it off and left it off and walked the dogs. And I came home and the network was up. It had done all this stuff. Fantastic. It's doing exactly what I hoped it would do. Clearly you can't do this with a Wi-Fi switch. You can turn it off, but you can't turn it back on, right?
USB.
It's
Yeah.
never going to work. So I'm doing all this stuff. Now, here's the thing that I did not think about when I did all this, is that there were previous automations that switch was using. And I renamed the switch, but that did not take it out of those previous automations.
Right.
So then everything's working fine for a week or two until the first time I have a Zigbee button beside my bed. That one click will turn off the light right next to me, and a long click will turn off the living room, all the lights in the living room. So the first time that we went to bed early enough we needed to do that, I clicked that, and it turned off the router because that used to be one of the light switches. And so I just didn't even think about that. And so I take my own network down by turning off the lights. That's the sort of thing that, kind of sloppiness in, thought and handling gets you to. Is everything about this is so great, except that, and that wasn't the only one. There was another, like every automation. By the way, you would think the first time one of these happened, I would go scrub all automations. But in fact, it was one automation by one automation. Like every time something turned that off, then I would have to go seek it out, find it, there was no proactive handling whatsoever.
So when you were renaming these switches, were you renaming the entity IDs behind them or leaving the entity IDs the same?
I think I did rename the entities, but I think the automation helpfully stayed with the renamed entity. I think. I don't think it took it out of it.
Yeah, because there's now two ways to do it, right? Everything used to be entity ID based, which was, and it still is like the primary key of most entities in Home Assistant. But now you can trigger on a device, so those entity IDs can change, and it will then actually use the device ID, which is static, does never changes. So yeah, if you're doing things in the UI and you're selecting devices, that would not update.
What I've learned to do is I'm exactly the same actually, Dave. I use my Christmas light smart switch anytime I'm in a bind, because you use a Christmas tree for what, like, I don't know, like a month. Okay, call it 2 months before I actually take it down, right? Whatever. So it's like you've got the switch that's sitting around for 10 months at least, right? So usually, chances are, whenever I'm doing stuff, it's in those 10 months. I'm like, oh, I need a smart switch. Okay, even Amazon's like, I need it. It'll get it tomorrow or whatever. It's like, okay, I need this today. Let me go, rip it out of the Christmas tree and then plug it in, do whatever. And I've done the exact same thing. So now what I do is I make sure I delete it, and then I re-add it until I don't do that, right? And I've just started putting a lot of my battery chargers and stuff like that on smart switches, right? Just because, again, from fire safety, whatever. So I've just been like, okay, let me do that. So just in a pinch, I just grab my Christmas tree one, and then same thing, and then it's like, it's part of our good night automation to turn off the Christmas lights. So I good night, and then my lawnmower batteries are no longer charging, right? And it's like, this literally happened to me like a month ago. So I'm with you, man.
Yeah, and I think if I started all over again, I don't know how workable this is. If you had a completely non-physical entity naming scheme, so you're naming it, because I kind of, probably most of us end up defaulting to, whatever, Dave Office, Dave Office outside wall or whatever, something like that. It tends to be very physical. And if you had only logical names and then, did everything via entity ID and just kept up that mapping, like Zigbee Smart Plug 007 is this one. I sort of have this dream of doing something like that. I don't even know if that would work, because clearly you don't want it's not helping you out to have a dashboard full of unreadable stuff. But if at the low level that's what worked, and then you had a logical name that sat above that, so all automations and everything you did by the logic, by the physical name, and then displayed everything by the logical name. That's sort of like the dream of the next version. If I had to do this again, is something like that.
I feel like if I did that, I would never find that plug again.
There is that.
It's like,
that same that same smart router from the cable company, that is one of the ways, like if it's a Wi-Fi plug, the only way some of them I've had to figure them out. The other thing I'm trying to do is just put labels on them. Like, just I've got a little
yeah,
brother label maker. Why
yeah,
am I not labeling every device in my house?
yeah,
But the the just plug the Wi-Fi device back in, and then I look at the app that comes with that thing, and I say, what just turned on? That's the thing.
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
it's like you have to do this weird detective work to figure out what your own stuff is. It's much like in a podcast, like when we were talking about keeping up with your podcast. If you had a wiki of everything you talked about, it would be trivial to keep up with that wiki while you were editing. But
yeah,
to go
Yes.
back and do it for 400 episodes is an unbelievable amount of work, right? So if you do 1 minute of extra work at the time, it saves you so much. But nobody thinks about doing that. Like, only the most disciplined, anal, retentive people actually think about recording the MAC address of everything you do and labeling everything and making sure you can recover it. We mostly stumble around in this voyage. We're like a post-apocalyptic science fiction story where we're trying to rediscover the old tech over and over again.
So it's funny. So I actually did go down that route where a bunch of my switches I ended up putting stickers on it with like the last six digits of the MAC address or whatever, right? So it's again just so I'm like, because sometimes what I'm doing is I'm like onboarding on mass, right? So I'm like, okay, if I let's say I move a bunch of stuff around, I'm like, I need to re-add these. Which one is this? Because I have like three or four of them, and then sometimes it's like, okay, a home assistant discovered three switches. Okay, well, I have to unplug it to see the MAC address or something like that, right? Or some of the cheaper ones don't even have the physical address written on it. So it's like, okay, so let me put this in so I can find it again. And that actually worked really well until I stopped doing it, right? And going back to discipline of and there's no reason. I just like, yeah, I just need this to work. I'll do this later. And then
Yeah.
now most of my switches don't have that anymore. And I'm like, all right, yeah, cool.
And there's definitely the family factor of, if anybody
Yeah,
else tried to figure out what's happening in this house, good luck.
yeah,
I can
yeah,
barely reclaim this information, and I know exactly what I did with everything. Uh,
yeah,
so the I know some people, make sure, like, only use Shelly switches, right? So there's always a switch, a physical switch that you can turn on and
yeah.
off on top of everything else. And I'm not exactly sure of what kind of succession plan uh, there should be if I have to sit down one day and just like give the rest of the family the course. All right, by the way, if you ever need to do this, here's here's why the backyard lights turn on at sunset, and here's what to do if you need.
Yeah, and here's the actual device that's doing it. Here it is. It's located behind this random, plasterboard over here.
Right.
Like, good luck.
It's it's funny. I've been thinking about this for years, right? And it's like because again, especially as you do more smart home stuff, you think about scenarios and stuff like that that could potentially come up, right? And it's like, so for years, I'm like, "Ugh, if I sell this house, what do I do?
hmm
Right? And it's like, and I think I'm at the point where I'm like, I'll say, listen, this is a smart home, but now it's like, should you require that smart home, you're gonna have to pay for it. And I think I'm gonna keep it, I don't know, it would be priced at the price point, like for the actual smart home capabilities. It'd be priced at this price point where it's worth my time to explain it to you because it's just way quicker for me to rip everything out and go back to, standard switches, standard whatever. Or I mean, I use Lutron everywhere. I might just leave the switches behind and just say, the logic is coming with me. If you need it, it's going to take time to document, right? And this is what it's going to be, kind of thing. So it's yeah, I'm also in that boat of like, how do you explain this to people, right? But potentially, if you keep all your automations in within Home Assistant or something like that, and it's like, I don't know, maybe you just send that logic to I don't know, ChatGPT or Gemini or something, and be like, give me a guide, write me a guidebook on how the automations work in this house. Here you go, and then and do that kind of thing, right?
Well,
So
and this is definitely like that Shelly route. If your stuff is in the wall, it's very different than if your stuff is just bulbs and lamps and plugs and outlets, which is I don't other than the RATGDO board, which is physically wired into the garage door. But even then, that would be very simple to pull out. Like I don't know that I have anything that would stay behind. I will say that when I sold the house that I started in Home Assistant, I didn't understand that when people walked through the house, looked at it, and made the offer, that all the stuff that was in the house, like attached to the walls, had to stay there. So I had to leave all my Ecobee thermostats and the Nest doorbell,
Oh
all
wow,
those things
yeah.
I couldn't take with me. I was like, oh no, I can't.
right,
It's like, oh
right.
no. Like if I had thought of this, I would have put the dumb Honeywell thermostats back up before anyone looked at it because they probably didn't care
Yeah.
that much.
Yeah.
And so I ended up having to rebuy all that kind of stuff. And it was like, oh no.
Well, I think honestly, it's not even about the rebuying. I mean, it is, right? There's a cost to it and whatever, but I think the other piece of it is like, again, it's like, how do you transfer stuff? How do you like, like Ecobee is a great example. If I sell my house tomorrow, great, fine, you can have the Ecobee, but it's tied to my account now. I have to remove it from my account and blah blah blah, and then inevitably something's going to get forgotten.
Yeah, and those I think, if I recall correctly, there's a like if you go into the manual, there's a just reset to factory, which I think I did on all the stuff. Other than the Nest, which I think I just took off on my account and was like, go with God. No one told me it was there when I moved in. And I remember I had to buy some weird wrench or some, like it doesn't use a normal screw and not even a torque screw. I think it uses
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
triangular screw. So I had to buy a new screwdriver to unhook it from the wall to press a button to reset it. And it's like, I'm not helping you on this. You're going to have to do all that same stuff yourself if you want this. No one helped me. I'm not helping you.
That's awesome.
I haven't even really thought ahead to, the only real thing I'm concerned with is just there was a time when I traveled and that was, kind of that's the nightmare scenario when you have one person in charge of the smart home is I'm in Europe and the lights won't come on.
Yes.
That's the thing everybody hates. So luckily we had very, very little of that. So the very first smart home device that I got, I know a lot of your guests have started with what is it, X10 back in like the late
Yeah.
90s
Yeah.
and early 2000s.
Yep.
And I never went through that era, but the very first thing I bought was a cheap Sonoff switch back in, and this is far before Home Assistant. This was probably 2015, 2016. And it didn't even come with plugs. It was just a relay with two terminals on either end. And you had to take a extension cord and cut it and strip it and screw it on there.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
I'm guessing they didn't want to deal with the different plugs around the world. So that it was kind of on you to attach a plug to it. And it was kind of my introduction to the weird Chinese devices because you buy the thing and it says Sonoff on the side. And I bought it from IT Studio.
Yep.
And the app you use was eWeLink. And I was like, none of these things line up. They're all different. Are they really the same? Like, what's happening here? And then, possibly ill-advisedly, that switch was like the one that turned the light on and off in my kid's room at bedtime, and that would turn on like as kind of an alarm when it was time to get up and get ready for daycare. And then at some point, I thought, this switch, this weird Chinese switch that I screwed the wires to the terminals, which certainly has no underwrite, whatever the UL certification.
UL certification. Yeah.
If it had it before, it didn't after I was in there fooling around with it. Like, that's the one smart switch in this house. Maybe that shouldn't be in a baby's room.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But that was the gateway. And it's like, the main thing that there's two things that make these things really cool is they're good and they're effective, or they're super cheap and they do anything. Right? Both have their values. And this was like super cheap and it, connected to the Wi-Fi and it turned on and off. I'm like, I want to say it was like $5 maybe, something in that vicinity.
Yeah.
I thought, for $5 I can turn a light on and off with Wi-Fi. That's awesome. And so that was the initial domino that started all the other dominoes falling. It's like, oh, so by the time I got to Home Assistant, I had, this panoply of weird. The other thing that happens, when you get into home automation, is you buy things because they're cheap or they're cool, and now you have 10 apps. Like, to turn on all the lights in the house is a 20-minute process because you have to remember what app turns this light on. That's the very first value that Home Assistant had, was giving me a consistent interface to this Tower of Babel of IoT devices in my house.
Yeah, yeah, and I think when prior to moving into this house, right? Like, again, I still live with my folks, whatever, and that was one of the things I was planning out. Is I'm like, how can I avoid having, like, I don't know, like 20 apps that do blah blah blah, right? And in my head, I wasn't even thinking local. I wasn't thinking any of those things, right? I was just none the wiser of that kind of stuff, and I was just like, I just don't want 20 apps. Like so, and that's where initially for me smart things came in, and then Home Assistant came along the way. But yeah,
Yeah, there's kind of like almost like a maturity level. You start and you want to just do anything, all right? And now, for example, I'm not going to buy any Amazon device because they're too hard. They're not impossible, but they're too hard to deal with. There was a time period where I had Amazon stuff, and I used to have to expose an input variable to Amazon, where Amazon would set the input variable, and then it would go back to Home Assistant. I was like, I don't want to deal with that. There are
yeah,
certain brands that I just don't buy anymore. I think Wemo, I had a bunch of Wemo stuff at one point. I'm like, it's just too hard to work with the other stuff. So now,
yeah, yeah,
the ironic thing is, like, no name Zigbee stuff from AliExpress actually works with Home Assistant better than expensive name brand stuff in a lot of cases.
yeah.
Yeah, because they lock it down and, it's their way or the highway, but yeah, they'll just make it them. What's your next big experiment or project that you've got on the horizon? What's your next thing you want to tackle?
I have this kind of, one of the things that I have tried to realize in myself, like after I retired, is like, am I just doing these things for the sake of doing them? am I actually achieving any kind of value, or am I just am I just buying all these things, to have a thing to do? And so I'm kind of, before I bring anything else into the house or, purchase another gadget or anything like that, I'm like forcing myself to, justify the value of it. I was like, what's going to be better if I buy this thing? Not just, it's a flashy, newer thing that does exactly the same thing as the old stuff. So, one of the things that I've been doing is I've been doing more and more self-hosting of things. For example, there was a podcast that recently stopped publishing. It was called Self-Hosted. And so every week they would talk about a thing. And so that's how I learned about paperless, and it's how I learned about Image and Dewarich. And so, a bunch of these projects, I started installing them one by one up until the point, I guess I never really thought about like the maximum capacity of my Synology NAS. You can host a lot of Docker containers, but you can't host infinite Docker containers on there. And at some point it starts falling over. So I had these cheap Mac Minis, getting back to the value of cheap, that I had bought, I think previous summer. And they're 2014 era Mac Minis, but they were $75 postpaid a piece. And I think it was even cheaper. I think it was a flat $14. They were $61 and flat $14 no matter how many you bought. So I'm buying 3 of them. And one by one, the drives have failed, and I've been fixing the drives. And so, running a 10-year-old, 11-year-old Mac is a drag to keep Mac OS on it, because, the OSs get sunsetted, and this is the last OS that will run on this hardware. And then slowly the apps will stop running on it because they will have a minimum OS that you no longer match. So,
Yeah.
but these are still nice devices. And you know what? They run Linux Mint like champions. So I've been replacing the devices. And so I created 2 of them. And one of them is just a Docker container. Like, I'm going to start moving the stuff off of Synology. It's like all these weird, paperless and things like that.
Yep.
I'm just going to put them on this. Anything that I didn't need. The one thing about Synology is you give it that Synology address, and it's fairly easy to hit things from outside your network. So only things that needed that run on the Synology now. And anything that's just an internally facing like application for myself, I'm kind of moving over to this Mac Mini running Linux Mint that does nothing but run Docker. Like, that's its only job in life, is to just host Docker containers. And it turns out that you can put a lot of Docker containers on one of these Mac Minis. So, so stuff like that, it's like just generally like trying to improve the quality of things in the house. The amount of, like, when I retired, one of the things I said to myself is I'm not just flipping my KPIs from my day job KPIs to my retirement KPIs, and here I have a bunch of goals and I must meet this and this level of productivity. I'm like, if that was the case, I should still be drawing a paycheck if I'm going to measure myself that way.
Yeah.
So I'm not I'm trying very hard to avoid holding myself to any side of kind of goal. But what I do want is just like, as you hit a pain point, and it doesn't, like, I don't even mean pain point. I just mean any sort of friction point in your operating in this life. It's like, why does it take me that long to look up this data every day? What if it just showed up somewhere? Why do I have to go, like, why do I have to manually turn this on? What if it just turned on? That sort of thing. So that's really kind of the lens I'm just looking at for everything. Is like, what if, that there's that old XKCD cartoon with the graph about how long it takes to do something and how often you do it and how long it takes for you to automate the doing of that thing. So there's a thing and it takes you, 20 minutes to write the automation. When do you break even on that? If it took you 1 second and you do it once a month, you're never going to break even on that. But if it takes, 5 seconds and you do it 10 times a day, you break even in about a month, right? So that sort of thing. It's like, all right, well, I do this often enough and it's just enough of a drag. What if I never manually did this again in my life? What if Home Assistant did this for me every time going forward? And so that's really how I'm approaching it.
That's cool.
Talk to me about your automation with your delivery packages. Like, have you been, I know we were just talking about it before recording, were you able to solve the problem? Or give us a bit of an explanation of what's going on.
Well, this is one of those things where I had 17 track for years and it worked just fine. And the way it used to do it is that there's 4 or 5 states, the waiting to ship, the not found, the in transit delivered, I think maybe an error in delivering. And there used to be a sensor for each one of those. And that sensor would have an array of the package information. And it got re-architected fairly recently to where there's each one of those things is just a sensor with a number. And to get the package information, you have to call the get packages action. And this is one of those, this is one of the biggest frustrations I've ever had in, 5 years of using Home Assistant, was getting all that together, because there's an example on the 17 track page at the Home Assistant site that it does not work. Like, there's a mishmash. The example has got like some information from previously and some information from now, and it just needs to be redone consistently. And I just couldn't get stuff together. And finally, what I ended up doing is I found in a pull request to that page where somebody had updated an example, and that pull request has never been accepted. In that pull request, it had an example for an automation to call that get packages action and then get that information. And I did it, and now, and that part works, right? The get packages call worked and correctly got it. Now, the finishing that linkage between that and showing it on the screen was like this ordeal that does not seem like it should be as hard as it was, but it was hard. So then I created an input variable to put that in there. And it just didn't do any. And I'd run the automation, nothing would happen. Like, the input variable's not set. And I commented out everything except for a maybe delivered, and it showed up. And I'm like, why why is delivery showing, like, why is it? And then I realized, oh, the max value of this is 255 characters. And if it's
Right.
more than 255 characters, which it is, if you like what I'm trying to do, almost always is going to be more than 255 characters. And if it's bigger than that, it doesn't throw an error. It just doesn't do anything. It just silently does nothing. And so I tried various ways. I don't even remember the name of the saver. You know, the saver integration. It lets you do.
Oh.
It lets you either keep the state of entities over time, but it also has a more robust input variable of indeterminate size. And so I'm only using that variable portion. So I'm writing to a saver variable. And then on my dashboard, I'm showing that value, so I have every 20 minutes, I have a automation that updates the states of my packages, and it writes it to that thing. And then that thing is what I show on my dashboard, and also what I show in terminal, right? That same kind of like markdown formatted list. But and this was also complicated by the fact that 17 track, the mobile app, has a feature that is helpful and not helpful at the same time, which is if you get logged out of your 17 track account and you add tracking numbers, it will continue to work on your mobile app. Your mobile app will continue to track it. However, what it's not doing is putting them in your account because you're logged out. So I, for the longest time, thought the integration to Home Assistant was not working because it had the same two packages from last November up until 2 weeks ago. And I thought, I uninstalled the plugin, I uninstalled the integration, reinstalled it. It still had the same two integration or the two packages. Then at some point I logged into 17 track from my web account solely while I was trying to do all this stuff. And I logged in there and I saw the same two packages and I thought, wait a second, 17 track only knows about these two packages. And I look at my mobile app and I go to the account and it says, the login button. I'm like, I'm not logged in, and I haven't been logged in for almost a year. And that's why nothing ever updates in Home Assistant, because I'm not updating my account. I'm just updating the mobile app. It's like, oh, you've got to be kidding me.
That sounds like it's got to be a bug or just something nobody has noticed, right? Just like logic that.
Well, I mean, if it wasn't for Home Assistant, it wouldn't even matter because on my phone, I'm still getting the information I expected to see. It was just that last linkage to other things is where it fell apart. So minus Home Assistant, I would still be not logged in and I'd just be fine. And I wouldn't know there was even a problem. So it was the only thing is trying to, update your account. And then when I did log in, I couldn't use the integration for a couple days because it put, 300 things in there and maxed out my API. And I couldn't use the API until my usage limits reset. So it took everything that was on the mobile app and shoved it into my account, and then said, "Nope, you can't add anything else today."
That's funny.
So that whole thing was just, it was so much harder than, this seems like one of the more simple things that I was doing. So I just want tracking information, and it's so much harder than, dealing with my car charger and dealing with all these bizarre logic. I was like, you have to just go into I had to go back to, junior software engineer, debugging a big system I didn't quite understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, I'm going to come out everything and see what happens. And then I'm just going to put things back in one by one. And that's how I thought, well, wait a second. If there's only this one thing, it works. Why is that? It's like, oh, the input variable. And then, it's like just step by step. And it's like, every step is like this slog of like, why is this not working? Why is this not working? And so this is the thing. Like, probably somebody smarter than me would have figured it out faster, but I imagine many, many people would have never figured it out. Right. Because who has the time to spend 4 hours debugging their 17 track?
Well, I was going to say it also, like, I mean, you mentioned you're retired now and so on, right? So it keeps you fresh a little bit there too, right, on your toes. Whether you want to or not, it's a different question.
There is no off switch. That was the Like even when I was a developer advocate, we would go to places. We'd be in London, and other people would go see Buckingham Palace, and I would be in my hotel room or the hotel lobby, like trying to finish this integration before a demonstration the next day. It's like I almost never saw any sight of any. I saw lots of hotels and Ubers and airports, and I very, very seldom, ventured out of that because I was always coding stuff. And so it's not really, the mindset really hasn't changed before and after. It's, the same kind of thing. It's like, what can I do? What can I accomplish? It is kind of, it is fun. I had to, like, right over here is a 3D printer 3D printers are like cars, right? If you don't start them for a while, good luck, because they're not going to start up.
Oh, I know.
And so
Yeah.
I have been trying, this Ender 3 Pro that I bought at the beginning of the pandemic. I've been trying to get that thing to operating. And, and I had Octopi, and I had that, showing the camera, and all the status was showing on Home Assistant. And just like trying to reclaim all that stuff has been so hard. Like just physically getting the gunk out of it's very much like rebuilding a carburetor, right? At some point I have to take my hot end off and clean it out or buy a new one, because I think it might never operate again because it sat for so long and got so clogged up. And so, that sort of thing. And I was really thinking about, for not that much money, I could have so much better of a 3D printer, right? I could do multicolored filaments and all this stuff for a couple $100. And I thought, I let this sit unused for 2 years to cause this problem. Why do I think I need another one if I went years without using it? So I'm trying to avoid just buying everything that jumps into my head,
It is the worst problem, right? Because it's like that's the same thing. I've got a Bamboo Lab 3D printer in the basement, whatever, an X1 carbon, and which is, I wouldn't say it's dated. It's still current gen, but it's like there's so many cooler, better, newer ones now, right? And it's like, oh, should I get that? I'm like, I don't remember the last time I 3D printed anything, right?
Exactly.
It's been a few months, or if I do, it's like something just tiny, and it's like, yeah, did I really need to did that recoup the investment of my 3D printer? Absolutely not, right? And I get, for some people it is they do it all the time and like that kind of thing, and I've got a few friends in that camp, and which is awesome. But I don't know, but it's like, I'm like, oh, I kind of want this new one. I'm like, no, you don't. Like, it's stop. Like,
In my life, I don't always hold to this, but I try to never upgrade about the goodness of the new thing. I try to only upgrade about the badness of the old thing. Like if the old thing is still doing the job I needed to do, that is, up until the point where Moore's law stops holding, if you waited another year, you're going to get a better 3D printer, right? So if you buy it now, in another couple of years, you're going to say, oh, but if I just spent another $500, I could have an even better printer than the better one that I bought 2 years ago. So you always do better. You're either going to get more for the same money or the same for cheaper if you just wait. And so I try to always hold out to the last, with Kindles was the same way. It's like, there's great new Kindles, but I'm just not going to buy another one until this one just stopped working or I lose it, because if I wait another year, I'll get a better Kindle.
yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah, this has been amazing. Dave, thank you so much. Where can people find you if they want to hear more of your crazy automation stories?
You can hear some of this stuff at my main podcast, which is Evil Genius Chronicles. It's at evilgeniuschronicles.org. And that's kind of the home for most of this stuff. I should be better about writing some of this stuff up in blog posts and just putting it up there, just so that it's got some SEO and people can find it. But
Shouldn't we all?
like many people, the social media world killed our blogs about 15 years ago, and there's this great like blog reclamation slowly happening. So I should probably
Yeah.
write things up and post it there. But for now, I talk a lot about these projects on my podcast.
Yeah, I encourage you to check it out. It's a great podcast. So, Dave, thank you so much.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers.